myself, I'm Daisy. I'm a third year grad student studying molecular biophysics here at Yale. And I'm a second year, this is my second year as the director of digital education for GSMI. So essentially moderating all the, or most of the webinars alongside Yessica. So I'm so excited to introduce all of you guys to the 4 speakers for today's webinar. Yessica Santana, a neuroscience PhD student at Oregon Health and Science University. Dennisha King, a neuroscience PhD student at University of Rochester. José Fabricio López Hernández, or he goes by Fibo, a molecular integrative physiology PhD candidate at Stowers Institute. And then it's Amber Young, an incoming mechanical engineering PhD student at UC Berkeley. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome all of our speakers for today. And so, yeah, please take it away.
All right, just very briefly, we're all just going to quickly introduce ourselves and how many times we applied to grad school and what are each of our trajectories were. So as Daisy said, I am a second year PhD student studying neuroscience at the Oregon Health and Science University. Previously, I did 2 postbacks in neuroscience, one at the University of Pittsburgh and one where I am right now. I graduated with my bachelor's in 2017. And as you can see from the screen, I majored something that was not in science, which is why I did 2 postbacks, but I did have psychology related research. And I applied to grad school twice, one in 2018. I applied to 11 programs. I got 1 interview and I was accepted, but I decided not to attend. And I applied in 2019. I applied this time to 8 programs. I got 3 interviews and 3 acceptances, and I took the GRE twice.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dennisha. I'm a second year PhD student in neuroscience at the University of Rochester. I was also a neuroscience post-baccalaureate scholar, along with Yessica at Oregon Health and Science University. Just a little bit about my undergrad journey. I began on a pre-medicine track doing biochemistry research because at the time I thought I was going to go to med school, but you know, plans change. And I later switched to being a neuroscience major. So I graduated having majored in neuroscience and public health. I had 3 years of undergrad research in total, and I also did a National Science Foundation summer research experience for undergrads in biochemistry. I applied to graduate school twice. The first time I applied to only 1 program, and after 1 interview, I was waitlisted. So I took the opportunity to get more research experience. And then the following year, I applied to 10 programs, and I had 4 interviews and 4 acceptances. Never took the GRE, but we're going to talk about that later. And yeah, now I'm at the University of Rochester looking at amygdala dysfunction in psychiatric disorders.
Hi, everybody. I'm Amber. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a first year mechanical engineering PhD student at UC Berkeley. I graduated from Yale this May, and I actually started off as pre-law. I thought I was going to eventually go to law school, and then I realized I kind of like STEM more. So I switched to a physics major during my sophomore year. And because of that, I had to arrange a lot of my research experiences because I didn't have the necessary background to even apply for an REU. So in total, I have 2 years of undergraduate research experience. Yeah, and this is all to say that if you're just really interested in research, you should just go for it, basically. So I applied to 11 schools and I only had 3 interviews and 4 acceptances. I took the GRE once, but did not submit the score. And then I got the GEM Fellowship with the Aerospace Corporation. And I highly recommend applying for the GEM Fellowship because even if you just apply, they pay for all of your application fees. And you don't even need to win it at that point. So yes, that is me.
Hello, my name is José Fabricio López Hernández. I am originally from Mexico. I am now a 5th year graduate student at Stowers Institute for Medical Research in Kansas City. I finished undergrad in 2012. Studying genomic sciences. Then I did a master's that I finished in 2015. That was about integrative biology, bioinformatics related. Then I worked as a technician here at Stowers Institute before applying for grad school. I only did one application, one interview, and I got accepted. So with that, I would like to talk about what is the PhD experience and what it's like to be in a PhD program. All right, so what is a PhD program in science? Let's talk about the STEM PhD experience. The PhD is just a training. It's just basically a training experience where you're going to be taught how to basically do science and set your experiments and start doing analysis. And for that, generally universities pay for your tuition, and they also provide a stipend and health insurance. So the support varies from institution to institution. Rarely, some institutions will require to pay some fees for the credits that you will go through your program. And if you're in a university, you have the freedom to take many classes and many training sessions. Please, while applying, explore and check each one of the institutions if you have to pay certain fees throughout the courses. And of course, while you're applying, be mindful of that. And everybody else is going to talk about the process. If you strongly feel that those schools are the ones that you really want to apply, send emails, call, try to get as much information as possible so you are in a good position to apply. So why to pursue a PhD degree? The reasons are very large. There are several, but as it is a training stage after undergrad or having a master's, you will have the ability to develop your own project under certain guidance. The goal is to become a scientist with logics thinking for the discovery and phenomena exploration. And of course, you will go throughout this process. Going throughout this process, you will notice that beyond doing research, other activities will be necessary that will include teaching, presenting your research, sometimes even outreach, or belonging to council meetings, belonging to the student council. It will depend on the program where you're studying. So while doing them, this is an opportunity for you to improve your communication skills, planning, and execution. So the PhD can prepare you for different several paths. Those include, of course, academia, but there are other things like biotech, or as the STEM field grows, and we can see that after the pandemic, how necessary, for example, biosciences are important, how necessary and important are biosciences. The field is also growing. So a PhD in the STEM field, it's also useful for other areas like consulting in medical or industry fields, science communication and outreach. Also, with the development of new technologies that rely on science, as we have seen in the last year, it's necessary to work on government and policy that are key to sustain the scientific environment that we as scientists will develop. So the timeline is basically from 2 to 6 years. It could go up to 8. The average in the United States around like 5 and 6. The first year are basically rotations and taking courses. The rotations are a big opportunity to try different labs, to see if you fit in that lab, but more importantly, if you feel comfortable being in that lab, because you're going to be there committed for a long time, and you want to feel that you are welcome, that you are appreciated as a person from no matter your background. And the rotations are a great opportunity. Most of the programs have like 2 to 3 rotations. There are some others that can have up to 4 if the first rotations were not successful. So keep an eye on that, and also ask those kind of questions once you go to the next steps in the process. And the graduate level coursework is the classes that you can take. There are places where you can keep taking classes depending on what you need, but it usually takes just 1 year. Then a key part of the PhD process is the qualifying exam. So after you have started doing your research and you've done the groundbreaking work, you will have an exam that will determine if you will continue studying the PhD or not. Now, this is not something to be scared. You will be prepared for that throughout your process. And some institutions is just written, some of them is oral, some of them is a chalk talk that you're just asked questions, that they are just asking you questions. It varies from institution, but just be careful about that and prepare for it. There are some institutions, for example, in the program where I studied, it's not required to teach and be a teacher assistant, but there are some opportunities that I can do with other grad students and teach other grad students. In other universities, it is necessary to fulfill a certain amount of hours as being a teacher assistant. And again, that depends on the program. Those are the kind of things that you can ask to other students or that you can check in the web pages. And finally, the thesis research that you will develop once you start from in the lab until you finish. That is the key component of your PhD. That will determine how long it's going to take you to graduate, and that will also determine your profile as a scientist somehow. So now Amber will talk about how to choose a PhD program.
All right. So now I'm going to talk about how do we pick this PhD program where we'll spend the next 5 to 7 years of our lives. So the very first thing you want to do is consider your research field. So you want to pick a program that's related to your academic major or research field. So for example, biochem or geology or mechanical engineering. And there are going to be some cases where you're applying to a discipline that's not your main field, and you'll likely have to fulfill coursework requirements before applying. So for example, going from developmental biology to neuroscience. And even for myself, I had this change as well. So you have to be ready to justify your switch. So for example, I went from physics to mechanical engineering, and I wrote in my statement of purpose, which we'll discuss more later, why I thought I was prepared to make this change and why I'm excited to develop these new skills, even though I bring other skills to the table. So your research field is definitely something you want to consider when choosing a STEM PhD program. Next, you also want to look at which research laboratories are available at the universities you're applying to. So for every program, find at least 5 professors that you're interested in working with. Now, this doesn't mean finding 5 professors where you absolutely adore and love every single thing that they work on, because you're not going to find that. So find 5 professors that you like their research and you could see yourself doing that work. And the reason why we say 5 is because working with a specific professor is not guaranteed for several reasons. They could just not have enough space and have enough funding, or they could have not enough funding, but a lot of space, or just be away on sabbatical. As we saw, this last year was crazy and life happens. And then another thing is during this application process, so if you're applying this year, this upcoming semester, you can email a PI or professors that you're very interested in working with to ask if they have space, if you think that they're going to have space in the next upcoming year. And this is required for certain subfields, but not all of them. It's not required, as I mentioned, for other fields to email professors ahead of time, but it's a very good idea just so that they have seen your name before the application process. And so there are also many other reasons many other things you should look at when choosing a PhD program. So one, looking at whether the university offers special programs and resources. So maybe the PhD program offers internships that you can take, or maybe you could audit medical classes, maybe you can attain a dual degree, or maybe there are certain career development programs you're interested in. Also looking at teaching requirements. Some schools require that you teach more to supplement your stipend, while others may pay you extra for teaching, while some departments just don't even have a teaching requirement at all. Also, this is very, very important. I don't think I can emphasize this enough, but the location and the graduate community. You're going to live in this area for the next 5 to 6 to 7 years. So you should find a place where you're going to be happy living there. So for example, if you don't like 3 feet of snow, don't apply to graduate school at the University of Rochester. Just don't do that. You'd be unhappy. But also look at places that have supportive, diverse communities that aren't just in your program or department, but are among the places among the campus and the city and location of your school. And then the last very important point is diversity. So looking at well-established resources for minorities to strive in. So maybe there is a women's graduate group, or there's a Latinx group, or a Black grad group that you would be excited to join in, and they're well-established. Maybe the department or the university has well-established resources that you take advantage of during your time. Now, on the other extreme, but also not too uncommon, you will probably be one of the few minorities in your program or school. So while this is exciting, it could be an opportunity for you to, start initiatives. It's also something to really consider. Do you want to be in that position to devote a lot of time to start these initiatives? I also wanted to emphasize with diversity resources, sometimes departments might have like diversity committees or other opportunities that are unpaid, but you might feel obligated to participate in. That is something just to consider. You are in graduate school to do research, and you may not have time to do that, whereas some universities may offer, may pay you to do the same, diversity work. So I would definitely pay attention to resources related to diversity and inclusion at the schools and departments you're applying to. And next, I'll pass it off to Dennisha to discuss choosing a research mentor.
Okay, just a quick plug. The snow is actually not that bad here. But in any case, it's really important to think about many factors when looking to choose a research mentor. So in thinking about which professors you'd like to work with, you want to look for someone who's a good role model and has a solid track record of training grad students. So you want to look at, where the PI's former grad students end up, and you can find that out by asking the PI directly, maybe say something effective like, what kind of jobs do your students typically go in? Is it a postdoc? Do they go straight into industry? That kind of thing. That would let you know where the graduate students are headed. But you can also talk to some alumni from the lab. That's always a great conversation to have. You can get a better picture of who the mentor is as a person, what their skills are, what are some things that might be a little bit red flag, that kind of thing. You want to also know if that PI is going to be supportive of alternative careers. Traditionally, a lot of PIs are prepared to send you straight through the path of academia because that is what they've been taught. So that's probably what they have the most experience training people. So you want to make sure if academia is not the career path for you, that you'll still be able to find support in that lab. You want to work with someone who is ideally a leader or a rising leader in their field. Oh, and just one more point to add that I completely forgot. If it's a new PI and so they have not necessarily graduated a student before, you still want to have open conversation with them to make sure that they be willing to work with you on what it is you want to get out. So for me, the PI whose lab I'm currently in, all her students pretty much went into postdocs and into academia. And I straight up told her, I was like, I want to go into industry. And she was like, great. When the time comes, we're going to figure out what internships you can do in addition to your time being in the lab. So you just want to make sure that they'll be able to support you, whatever path you want to take. So you want to make sure that the PI is also someone who's a leader or rising leader in their field. And it is difficult to know how a new PI will fare in their field. So their interactions with you in one-on-one conversation should give you an idea of how their ideas resonate with you. What you can do is also go into PubMed, just type in the PI's name really quickly, and you can take a look at some of their recent publications. You want to make sure that they have a decent track record with producing publications. And based off of some of the abstracts that you take a glance at, you'll be able to tell if their work aligns with things that you're interested in. You want to make sure that the lab is going to be a supportive environment and that it's not going to be competitive because grad school is hard. You want to make sure that you're comfortable and you have adequate support and that you're not miserable. Like I said before, you want to make sure that the lab is productive and is producing, because in academia, your currency are publications. That is your currency. You want to make sure that your research mentor is a champion of diversity. So they believe in not only recruiting diverse or underrepresented minorities into their lab, but they also make it a point to provide proper resource and training once they do have diverse students. And one way you can tell if they're not already having conversations with you, you can always see the types of students that they invite to come into their lab. For example, if they have a summer program for underrepresented minorities where they allow URMs to come into the lab for a summer and they teach them and mentor them, that's the kind of thing you're looking for, that, okay, this PI cares about diversity. Ethnicity and gender, in an ideal world, we'll all like to work with someone who looks exactly like us, because, you know, representation matters, and that would absolutely be amazing, but that is extremely rare, especially if you identify as a URM. It's very rare that you'll meet another PI who will look like you or have similar background or experiences that you have, that you face. But if you do, that's always awesome. So in thinking about how many PhD programs you should apply for, you should apply to as many PhD programs that you see yourself interviewing for. Because the process of applying is tedious. You have a lot of components that go into the application, and you want to make sure that you take enough time to tailor each application for that university so that they can see that you really want to go there. So you don't want to give yourself too much work. Especially if you have other things going on in your life, such as like a job, or you're still in the middle of undergrad, that kind of thing. You also want to make sure you're not having to fly out back to back to too many interviews, because that also gets to be a lot. So, you know, read about each program, talk to the current grad students, make sure it's somewhere you really want to go and it's going to be worth all of the time and energy that you have to invest into it on the front end. Also keep in mind that graduate school applications cost anywhere from $70 to $120. They can be very expensive. There are fee waivers available, and you can usually get them at conferences such as ABRCAMS or SACMAs. You can also go on program websites. Some universities will automatically waive your fee application if you submit your application by a certain deadline, or they'll even waive it if you like check a box saying that you identify as a URM. Or it never hurts to send an email. The worst that could happen is that they say no, but always ask. So you should always comply. You should start by compiling a list of 10 to 12 PhD programs, and you can rank them on whatever scale you would like, from, you know, your top choice down to like something this will still be a good choice. And then lastly, it's somewhere you can still see yourself being happy, but you know for sure you'll get in based on, you know, statistics and like you meeting the requirements for what the program explicitly says on their website that they require or that they look for in their students. But, you know, make sure that these are all places you want to go and that the available research at that institution aligns with your interests. You want to make sure that wherever you end up, you'll at least be able to find one lab that's going to make you happy. You're going to be in a great environment. You like the grad students, you like the other extracurricular activities that they have to offer. So in terms of thinking about criteria, you want to think of program of study. So neuroscience, biochemistry, engineering. You want to think of research mentors, ideally around 3 people that you can see yourself working with. You want to also make sure that these people have funding for you to take on a new student. And you can check that by simply looking up on the NIH website. You can always check what grants they have available before reaching out to them. You want to see if the institution has any special programs, like, for example, if they have a neuroscience versus a neurobiology and anatomy track, which could be slightly different. You want to see if they have a teaching requirement, if that's something that you're interested in and want to teach. Generally, institutions that have an undergrad campus right next door, like that are part of the same institution, like there will be some component of teaching readily available to you. Location, very important, as Amber said earlier, and as well as diversity. You want to make sure that they're supporting and taking care of the students, all of the students that they're recruiting. So there are some other finances within the application process that you have to think about and take into consideration. So once you get to the interview stage, which is typically accompanied by most PhD applications in the biological sciences, the program will pay for your travel, your stay at the hotel, along with meals that you're going to eat when you're with them are going to be covered by the program. But be aware that some hotels will ask you for your credit card and charge you a particular fee as incidental. So you want to just be mindful of, rent that you're going to be paying that month, and try, if you can, to set aside some money in advance for that possibility. Keep all of your receipts. Some universities, well, when I was interviewing, some universities had me pay for all of my stuff up front, and then I submitted my receipts, and it took about 3 weeks to almost a month to be reimbursed. So it's definitely something you need to budget in your finances to make sure that you're still going to be able to pay rent or do whatever you need to do for that month. So keep all your receipts, including travel to the airport, so your plane ticket, if you had to Uber or Lyft. And even if some universities will also reimburse you for mileage. So if you decided to drive from your location to where you were interviewing, they'll reimburse you for that. So also keep in mind receipts for meals that were not hosted by the program. So your first and last days of the interview weekend. Sometimes they'll have you fly in the day before and they don't have any activities going on. You still need to feed yourself and take care of yourself. So keep those receipts. And you will be compensated if there's proof of purchase. The only thing that they don't compensate you for is alcohol. So just to keep a note, most programs will provide around $500 to cover travel expenses. So if the plane ticket exceeds that price, it will likely have to come out of your pocket. So money does matter. And with that, we're going to get into how do I apply for a PhD program? And I'm going to let Yessica take that over.
There we go. So I'm going to cover this next part, which is going to be parsed into 2 sections. The first is standardized testing. And the second is like a very general timeline of what you should be doing for each of the months leading up to the deadlines and then after the deadlines. So for standardized testing, if it would go forward. Cool. First off, standardized testing now has, I guess, formed to the pandemic situation. And you can take the GRE or the TOEFL, which is the English proficiency test, online. This is just a screenshot of their website. I highly recommend going to the ETS website and checking the requirements to see if you can take it online if you need to. The requirements are kind of specific. So, if you do want to take it, if there are schools that do still require it, I would just say, look over this website, make sure that you meet all of it before moving forward. So I'm going to talk about 2 standardized tests, the GRE and the TOEFL. But first, for the GRE, some really basic ground rules. The GRE stands for Graduate Record Examination. It is a 4-hour required test for some graduate schools. And the reason why that bullet point is phrased that way is that the GRE has now been moved to be optional. And for some programs, it's not even required to apply anymore. There's many different studies now showing that the GRE doesn't really indicate how well you're going to do in grad school. So that prompted many departments to start dropping it or just making it optional. Well, which programs no longer make it optional? These are 2 websites that you should quickly type into your search bars and bookmark it, because it is a massive list of PhD programs that no longer require the GRE. The first encompasses both the humanities and the STEM programs. The second one is just strictly for bio or biomedical graduate programs. As for the finances of the test, it is $205, which is quite expensive. And to send scores to each program, if you know what schools you want to apply for the day of the test, you can submit up to 4 of those for free. Again, that's in quotes because you're still paying for something. And anything additional on top of that, or if you decide not to submit any scores the day of, and now you know which schools you want to send your scores to, each one is $27. There is a fee reduction program, and it gives you 50% off, which is still kind of expensive, especially if you plan on retaking it or something. And I have been told, and you guys should all know that this fee reduction program, if you need to apply for it ahead of time, because the processing time could take anywhere between like 2 weeks or up to a month. So before you even consider taking the GRE, check and double check if any of your programs still require it. If the program's website isn't updated, it doesn't really hurt to email them and ask if the GRE is no longer being accepted. So as to how the GRE is scored, there are 3 sections. There is a verbal, a quantitative, and a writing portion. And the first 2, the verbal and the math portion, you are scored from a range of 130 to 170. And for the writing portion, the range is from 0 to 6. Now, the average score for the GRE is 155 for both the verbal and the math section, and a 4 for the writing section. It is, I guess, the general consensus that a grade score is anything above 160. Here is a pretty awesome visual to see what are the average scores for both the verbal and the math portions for like vague programs, not for all of them. So if you're applying to a program in math, obviously you want a higher math score, and whereas that requirement isn't so much needed for, let's say, English or any of the social sciences. So the next standardized test is the TOEFL. Sorry, my screen froze. So the TOEFL or the IELTS is an English proficiency test, and the scores are valid for only 2 years. And most programs, for the most part, widely accept the TOEFL. The price is $180. I guess less programs accept the IELTS, but it's almost as equally expensive. And I didn't know this, but the price does vary by city. And the same as the GRE, if you know what schools you are applying to the day you take it, you can send 4 reports for free. Any additional one is $20. One of the things about the TOEFL, you can actually have an interview in place of the TOEFL if you ask the program. So if you know you need to take it, and I'll talk a little bit more of that later on, ask if you can take an interview instead of this pretty expensive test. And it's hyperlinked here, but it's also on our website. That list is a massive list of minimal scores, school codes, and program links to basically all the TOEFL necessities that you need. It was curated by Annabelle, who I know is in the chat. And he also created this really nifty guide if you need help determining if you do need to take the test or not, because some of the, I guess, criteria can become a little bit complicated. As in a brief walkthrough, very first question you need to ask yourself is English your native language? If it is, you don't need to take it. If you don't, if it's not, sorry, the next question is, did you obtain your bachelor's degree in the here in the US or in a country where the primary language is English? If so, then you don't need to take it. If not, then you do need to take the TOEFL. And here, this is where like the different nuances come into play. If you got a master's in a predominantly English-speaking program, then you probably have to ask the program itself if that can be considered as a placeholder for the TOEFL because it is by a case-by-case basis. I do want to say that we have a whole separate webinar as applying for as an international student. I think not every international student has to take the test, but it is next Friday. I'll just drop it in the chat if I have it copied, pasted. Yes, I do. Okay, for some reason I can't hit send, but I'll drop it once I'm done sharing. Oh my God, it won't go, there we go. All right, so how are these tests scored? So the TOEFL has 4 sections and each section is 30 points. Each of the 4 sections corresponds to reading, listening, speaking, and writing. There are what is known as cut scores. That's between 90 and 100, and 26 for speaking. Cut scores are not, I guess I would say, like a hard line. They're just generally used to make decisions for admissions. And another thing you should know is that some programs may or may not require it, but TAs, you might be asked to TA in place for an English proficiency category. And here's just a really handy table for what the scores are and where generally they are considered to fall under. So moving on to the timeline portion. This timeline portion is not like a be all end all. These are just suggestions leading up to the deadline and what happens after that. But yeah, so we're almost approaching the end of August. Next month, for the month of September, you should definitely start making a list of PhD programs that you are interested in. Make sure to write down all the deadlines. They're generally within the same like 2-ish or 3-ish weeks, but some can be due as late January. Make note of all their requirements, which we're going to talk about later, but typically they include the requirements shown here. Start asking about fee waivers, as Dennisha talked about, and definitely start drafting or just thinking about your statements. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you know, the most difficult part about writing is getting started. And for that month, you should also be thinking of who can write you a strong letter of recommendation. Dennisha will talk more about this later, but start thinking of professors or mentors who have seen you grow as a person and as a scientist, and try not to rely on professors who don't know you as well. Some more stuff for the month of September. Definitely begin preparing for the GREs if you plan on taking them. If not, then you don't have to worry about this. October is probably the latest you can take the GRE before it gets processed and you can send it out to like the actual programs. And there are some resources that can help you study for the GRE, such as these two. And there's like a general consensus that you should start studying 2 to 3 months before the test. And if you're asking yourself, do I need to still take the GRE? That's a personal decision. I know some people who make their PhD program lists solely on the basis of they're not accepting the GRE, but you should know that when you take the GRE, the scores are valid up to 5 years. You could take it online due to COVID, but just keep in mind that this is a very costly test. And if you don't have the financial means, definitely take this into consideration. So for October, if you plan on taking any tests, do so now. This is your last chance. Now's a good time to check for fellowships. We have a fellowship repository on our website as well. Now that you have the ball rolling for your personal statements, have anyone and like anyone look at it. The more eyes, the better. Which is cheesy, but I think the first time I applied to grad school, I only had like 3 people look over it. The second time I had like 11, and it made a difference. Remind your letter writers of letters of recommendation. They're probably gonna be very busy. You know, send them a reminder like every 3 weeks and increase their frequency as the time goes along. If you plan on attending a conference, definitely do so. I know they're going to be virtual, but a lot of graduate programs and their coordinators attend these conferences and do hand out fee waivers. Do go for the experience as well. Many people love these conferences, and if you haven't been to one, just wait. Unfortunately, it's virtual, but for certain departments that are not so much biomedical focused, but such in the ecology programs, computer science, psychology, typically it is recommended that you start contacting professors that you want to be working with, typically because these programs, they don't have a rotation format as most biomedical programs do. You just join the lab directly. So if you're going to contact them, do so around this time. Also, I can't see the chat in the moment. I see the numbers, but if I open it, it's going to blow up, but I'll get to the questions afterwards. For the months of November and December, it's a lot of repetition. Send your final reminders to your letter writers if they haven't submitted them already. Put those final finishing touches on your personal statements. Get those fee waivers, and try not to submit the application the day of. Do so a little bit ahead of time. It's mainly for your own sake. And most application deadlines are in the first week of December. But as I said, some of them are due as late January. So what happens after you apply? You should hear back definitely by the end of February for more so biology related programs about an interview. And if you do not, you may be waitlisted or not accepted. If you get an interview, it does not mean you're automatically accepted, but just know that if you are interviewed, you have a very high chance of getting accepted. And a note for international students, instead of an interview, and these interviews are conducted typically in person. For international students, sometimes you will be given the option to do a Skype or a phone interview. For non-biology programs, they'll let you know via email, and sometimes they have visiting weekends after acceptance, so you get to know the school. So about these interviews, I don't think any of us have any idea if it's going to be virtual or not. I think it might be by program or university by university cases. So unfortunately, we can't answer that for you. In the general realm, most biological and biomedical interview weekends take place between January and March. Non-biology programs are a little bit longer, between January and early April. And this is your chance to know the program, speak with the faculty members that you wrote down and you're potentially interested in working with, learn who your potential cohort members are, and see if you actually like the campus and the city. And then the actual offers will follow. I think I've seen as early as 2 weeks after the interview. So that can take place from anywhere between February to April. And this is around the time where you're going to learn about the monthly stipend and a moving stipend if they offer one. And the one deadline that I think is universally shared between all programs is April 15th. That's the day you have to tell the program whether you accept or decline. And this little last note here, when you get accepted, make sure to thank the people who wrote your letters, whether that be professors from ages ago. It's always just nice to thank the people that helped you get where you are. All right, so next portion is going to be, what are the components of grad school application?
Okay, so next I'm going to talk about the graduate school application components. So first, there are 5 general components. So the first is the online application. So asking you background questions, demographics, education. Next, you're going to upload your transcript just to determine your academic preparedness and performance. Then you'll upload a CV/resume, and this is an overview of all of your academic and extracurricular activities that are relevant to the graduate school program. And then letters of recommendation, and these should assert your scientific and personal qualities, and also to describe the nature of your relationship with the person who's writing your letter. And then the last thing is your personal statement. And this should show your scientific interests, your research experience, professional goals, interest in the program, and biographical details. And I'm going to focus on the CV and resume for the next round. So you're going to have like general information on there. So your name, contact information, and education, normally on the top. You're going to include your research experience and any relevant employment. You'll also add any publications and presentations that you've done, teaching experience, leadership positions, and references. And just to note for your CV, it should be in reverse chronological order. So we're going to dive in. So for example, this is the top of Paula's CV. So she has her name at the top. She has the physical address, phone number, and her professional email address. Education, so institutions at the top on one side, the date and the location on the other. And you can include you should include your GPA in your CV if it's really good. I guess we could talk about this more later, but I've heard the rule of thumb is to put your GPA on your CV if your GPA is above a 3.5. And if it's not, no worries at all. That's just like something you could do. It won't hurt you if you don't put it on there. Yeah, and so also included in her CV, Paula included relevant coursework, so epigenetics and cell bio and all that. And yeah, where this was done. And so next, you should also really put your research experiences on your CV. Here, Paula included the location of where the research was done and the department, her title, and then her research advisors and the PI, and the dates that she did this research. And so when you write about the work you did, make sure to include what was accomplished. Like, what did you get done while you're working in the research lab for a summer or 1 or 2 semesters? Like, what did you accomplish during that time? So be sure to include your undergraduate research experiences, summer research experiences, independent study projects, or and especially postgraduate research. So here, Paula also included her teaching experience. So she had the name of the courses on the top, her title, the semesters that she taught the courses, and her responsibilities as she was a TA. So list any courses you've been a teaching assistant for and how many semesters in specific roles. You can also list other teaching experiences. So for myself, I had never been a TA before. And the teaching experience I had actually had nothing to do with STEM at all, but it was teaching experience. I was teaching people a subject, so in a classroom. So I was like, well, I'm putting this on my CV. And so also include other projects and leadership positions that you've had. So for your leadership positions, they should really be roles that are somewhat related to academia. So like maybe like don't put, like if you're trying to decide between what you put on your CV, maybe don't put that you're president of a dance team. Like you don't really need that on your CV. I mean, you could, but it's more important to have, like, if you were also, a strong committee member on like a science group or a science media thing or communications thing or inclusion in your department type group. They love that stuff. So make sure you list your leadership position, so the name of the organization, your position, the dates involved, the description of the role, and then I can't stress this enough, like what you accomplished in that role. So I think it's if you're going to list a couple things, like 3 bullet points, make sure like you use like one bullet point to kind of describe what your duty was, and then the second or the next two to describe like what you accomplished during that time. And then if you have done presentations or publications, make sure to list your name in bold and put it on there, of course. So the title of your poster or presentation, the name of the workshop or seminar, and the location. And so this includes presentations for any conference, undergraduate research symposium, or summer research programs. I had never been invited to a conference, so all of my presentations were like, I literally put like, yes, I presented my thesis for my department, because even though that was required for everybody, this was presentation experience. So also with your CV, sometimes you'll see examples of people that had like these elaborate, like they went to like 6 different conferences since they were in high school, and they put all of those on there. And sometimes you think, oh, well, you know, this presentation wasn't like as important as what I've seen. Maybe I shouldn't list it. Just definitely list. It's better to list what you've done. Just list basically everything you've done. It's very important. Don't undervalue yourself. You know, I think that's, oh yes. And then also include any awards you've won on your CV. So have the title of the award in bold, the date that you received it, and then underneath it, list what the award was for. Any award is a good award. So yeah, it doesn't have to be an award or a fellowship that people have heard of that you decide, oh, I should put that on my CV. So yeah, list all your awards: university awards, conference travel awards, poster prizes, scholarships and fellowships. If you were on the dean's list, definitely put that on there. And so some last thoughts on your CV: be consistent with the format, font, and the language. Highlight important accomplishments first, and just know that your CV highlights all of your important accomplishments, and it can be up to 6 pages. In general, the difference between a CV and a resume is much shorter, and it really only lists relevant experiences. And then the last point I'll put with the CV is that you all have accomplished so much in your time before applying to graduate school. Like, put everything that you've done on your CV, because you're incredible and amazing. Yeah. So next I will pass it off, I believe, to Dennisha to talk about letters of recommendation.
Okay. I'd like to echo Amber. You guys are all amazing and you're going to do well. Okay, so we're going to get into talking about some letters of recommendation. So in thinking about who you want to ask for a recommendation letter, most graduate programs are going to ask you for 3 letters of recommendation. And if you're currently enrolled in college, your letters of recommendation are going to likely come from 3 of your professors. So ideally, you want to ask professors who are in or related to the field of your graduate program. So whatever graduate program you're interested in applying to, whatever field that is, you want to make sure that you're asking recommenders who are in that same field as well. So if you're, for example, if you're applying to a master's program in engineering, then the professor of art history class that you might have taken, probably not the best person to ask for a recommendation for this occasion, regardless of how well they might know you. But you do have to acquire 3 letters at the bare minimum. And some of the professors who know you best may be from unrelated fields, but if need be, it is okay to ask a professor from an unrelated field for a letter of recommendation if they're able to speak about skills you have that they believe will make you a good fit for the specific field that you want to go into. And in general, if a professor doesn't feel comfortable writing a letter for you because their expertise does not align with the grad program of your interest, they will likely just tell you that. They'll be straight up and just be like, no. So yeah, you should ideally look for people whose interests and like research backgrounds align with the program you're trying to apply to some degree. And if you're not currently enrolled in college, then past professors may not be the clear choice for your recommenders. So for professionals on this call who are currently applying to graduate school, your professional contacts, such as your boss or mentor, those are also great candidates as well. So like a boss or like some type of mentor figure can certainly speak to your work ethic, your drive, and other qualities and skills that you have that can speak to your potential for success in a graduate career. A colleague could also be a good fit for a letter writer. And if you had a good relationship with a former professor, and it doesn't hurt to reach out and ask them for a letter recommendation, even if you're maybe 2 or more years out, you can still reach out if you had a good relationship with that person. And just another note, it's always nice to think strategically about what each letter recommender can say about you. So in my personal experience, even though I graduated college with a 3.4 GPA, in some of my STEM classes, I didn't do as well. And so I used, as I said earlier, I was a double major in both neuroscience and public health. And I felt like I was the star student in the public health classes. So I used, even though I was applying to only neuroscience programs, I used my professor who mentored me through all my public health courses. And she was able to speak about my character, all the organizations I was involved in on campus. She talked about like my dedication in her class, and she was able to vouch for me and talk about my other strengths and qualities, even though she did not have experience with me doing research with her. So you can always think about what each recommender can speak to about different aspects of your character that can build to show the people who are going to be reading your application that you're a great candidate, because you have all these people willing to vouch for you and speak about how great you are as a person. So you want faculty that can talk about whatever accomplishments you have, whether you're president of different organizations on campus, you've won department awards for your research, if you won an award giving a talk or presenting a poster at a conference, you want them to be able to talk about your intellectual potential and your motivation for study. And you want to see mentors. You ask mentors who've seen you grow as a professional and as a person. So sometimes, maybe it's a class that you got a B in, but you worked really, really hard for that B. And you were able to show like how willing you were to put in extra time, going to office hours, seeking help. That kind of thing really speaks about your character and your ability to advocate for yourself and seek help when needed. And so if it's a class that you got to be in or didn't do as well as you would have liked, but you worked really hard and your professor acknowledges that, that would be a great person to ask for a recommendation letter. You want them to ideally be able to advocate for you and convince whoever's going to be reading your application that you have the potential to succeed in graduate school and as a scientist. So it's always best to ask faculty that know you well. So whether it's someone who did one-on-one research with you, your department chair, a faculty mentor, even a summer program research mentor, those are all great people to ask recommendation letters from. And again, in academia, it's always about currency. So it is also nice because certain names carry weight, if you catch what I'm putting down. So any research and or honor program directors, any big name that you have some type of contact with, definitely ask them for a recommendation letter because name carries weight. So when you're thinking about like how to put together an email to ask your recommenders for a letter, you want to start early because you want to give these people time, okay? Because they probably have a million other projects and other students also reaching out at the same time. So you want to make sure you give them advance notice. So at least 2 months in advance. Be succinct, direct, and respectful when contacting them. And you state the main point of your email in the subject line. And so in your email, you need to provide your CV or resume. It is a good idea to also provide them with a personal statement. Some people will ask for it, but I think you should be prepared to just go ahead and send that, just so they can get a little bit more about your story. Because as much as we'd like to think that, you know, we're all special people and like stand out in the minds of professors, you have to keep in mind that there are tons of other students that are probably asking for recommendation letters as well. So you want to make sure that, like, you know, they have the whole picture about who you are and like what you want them to say, and like, you know, the kind of things that you're looking for in a program, and that can be communicated really well through your personal statement. You want to also include, you know, something that you might want them to touch on in the recommendation letter. Like I said, for example, if it was a class that you might have struggled in, you can ask them to like say, like, you know, like speak about how rigorous your institution is, or like how difficult these courses are, and to put your grade in context, like, okay, like this student worked really hard, they were coming to office hours, that kind of thing. That also speaks to your character, and it reflects really well. And you also want to include the list of programs that you're applying to, as well as put the deadlines in bold so that they're aware of how close the deadlines are, and where they're going to ideally have to send their recommendation letters to. Or also, it's good to include the programs, because most often those programs are going to directly email them a link. And sometimes it can go to the spam folder. So you want to make sure that they know which program to look for an email from, for them to be able to upload their letter when the time comes. And it's perfectly fine to send a follow-up or a reminder email. But ideally, you should be asking people that you're confident are going to come through for you and are going to be responsive. And with that, we're going to talk about personal statements. And I'm going to turn that over to Amber.
It's actually me.
My bad, Yessica.
So the personal statement, we can have a whole 2-hour discussion on it, but just so everyone's aware, there is going to be a webinar just talking about the personal statement. The date hasn't been set yet, but we'll announce on our Twitter when that day is going to be. But this is just going to be a very brief overview of the most important points that you can put in a personal statement. And this is parsed into 4 sections, the first of which is your background and your motivation. So your background is basically how you got interested in science and why you are interested in your specific field. So this is your time to talk about your own experiences, and definitely mention how they prepared you to be the scientist that you are right now, and how it's going to help you for these next 5 to 7 years. You can also mention what you plan to do with your degree if you know that already. If you don't, do not panic. You can definitely list like 1 or 2 options, but now it's very understanding that your mind can change from 5 to 7 years, and you don't have to be committed to something that you wrote in your statement a while ago. The second section is to remember your objective. These committees do want you to recognize that graduate school, while it will open many doors for you, it's also quite difficult. It is a very rigorous scientific training program. So definitely mention some sort of like internal reflection as to why you want to go to grad school, and like how you will manage the next 5 to 7 years. No, okay. The next section should be probably a good portion of your statement, is what about the specific program that you're applying for? Why are you drawn to it? It will not serve you to have the same personal statement copy pasted for all, let's say, 10 programs that you're applying to. Definitely mention 1 or 2 paragraphs about the program or the department that you really like. Definitely mention specific faculty members whose research you can see yourself like working alongside, and definitely write it down, like write down their names in like 1 or 2 sentences as to what their research is and how it relates to your own work, or why you want to transition into working into that subfield. And there's a small example right here. And the reason why we are emphasizing this more, I think if you speak to any graduate student, they'll tell you that it's not the program, it's not the department that makes your PhD journey, it's the lab that you join. The lab that you join and pick and which professor you are going to be mentored under is probably the #1 factor that determines how you're going to set your own trajectory. As to like how many faculty members you should write down in your statement, definitely do like at least 3 to 4 per statement for each program that you're applying to. And the last portion is honesty. This is your time to, I guess, pour your soul into this document. And these committee members should get a sense of who you are as a person. And this is your time to show your story about your scientific self. With that being said, avoid metaphors and cliches and generic statements, such as like science is cool, or you love science. Everyone here, we all love science. That's why we're all in this webinar and why we want to pursue the degrees that we want to pursue. If this is your way to outline, that's totally fine. But try to err away from that. And as I mentioned, and as many others have mentioned, definitely get as many eyes on it as possible. Sometimes I don't consider myself a fantastic writer, but some people are, and some people can give really good constructive criticism on personal statements, and that can be scary sometimes. We don't, as human beings, we don't like being critiqued, but this is the one moment where we should try to embrace it. And with that, Phoebe's gonna end this webinar with like more tips.
Okay, this is the last part of the webinar, and I just want to add a few more tips for the application process. By now, you have a strong background of the information that you need to apply. There are just a few things that are common mistakes that truly reflect, or that if you avoid them, it will truly reflect a really good application. So one of those are, for example, if you have mistakes such as typos in your application, that reduces some points for the people that are actually reading it. So the goal is to make your application cohesive and make it with the best of all efforts. So these mistakes as typos are simple yet common. So make sure to have all the names also correct, and writing names can be cumbersome. Just remember to check in each one of the applications separately, the names of the institution that you're applying, the name of the PI that you want to work with, and this is then an opportunity for you to present the quality of your work. Second, do not list your resume. Programs are not only interested on how smart you are, and I'm sure that as you love science, you are very smart, but they also want to know about you. They want to know your motivations, your goals, and remember to keep a cohesive voice throughout your entire application that reflects who you are and that shows why you want to be in that institution, in that program, okay? Also, maintain verbosity. These may sound counterintuitive, but simple sometimes is better. Conveying a clear message comes across more easily than a convoluted or repetitive text. So a clear message with a fluent writing will help you convey the message that you want. And for that, remember to maintain a linear, concise, coherent, and succinct writing. And that will always look good in your application, not only for the PhD, but for your entire career in academia. That, of course, includes avoiding elements that are irrelevant for your statements. If they don't add for the purpose of your writing, just don't put them. So every word that you use has to be focused in the main goal of applying for that school, and just keep that in mind. Now, finally, this is something that we all may share, especially coming from different backgrounds, but sometimes things don't go as planned. So yet, here you are, ready to apply for grad school, and show them then your enthusiasm and show them what you are capable of. So sometimes what you consider that might be a setback, let's say that you fail a few subjects during a semester, you have some problems at home, who knows, the amount of reasons why things could go wrong are almost infinite. But sometimes you can take these setbacks and they can be stated as a motivation to move forward. Let's say that you fail in a class and the semester following, you actually excel that. So you have proved that you can move forward despite all the things being against you, and focus on the positives that led you to this point where you're applying them for grad school. They want you. They want people that are capable of moving forward. And they also are looking for people from our background. So as long as you show your grit and your enthusiasm to be part of that program, that will always be helpful. So keep that voice with you and take it for yourself. So faculty members and PIs that you have throughout your career, or any other work that you have done in a lab, or teachers can support you with this. So talk to any mentor that you have had. If you had a close relationship with a professor just because you love that class, talk to them and mention your interest to belong to a certain program. Those are your best allies in the application process, because they are the ones that know you. And don't be afraid to ask. I can tell from personal experience that in my early years in the career, I didn't ask. And now that I ask, I am realizing how useful it is. So don't be afraid, ask, see if that mentor works for you. And if not, keep asking to the other people. The more you ask, more chances you have to succeed in this area. So every student has multiple and distinct tools at reach. Use most of them, so you are perfectly poised for that graduate application. And with that, I think we can take any more questions that you would like to have.
Yeah, I actually just want to add one more point that Fivo mentioned regarding sort of don't dwell on the negatives, but if there is like some outstanding like factor that is like really obvious, like your grades being really low, but then they increase exponentially the next semester due to, you taking on like 2 extra side jobs to financially support yourself or something like that. Denise has touched upon requesting recommendation letters. And that is the perfect opportunity for you to just mention it, right, in your personal statement, like, oh, I was going through this X, Y, and Z. However, right, it's important to switch that negative into a positive. However, I overcame that obstacle. And then if you wanted someone to support that, someone who was a faculty member, you can set a Zoom meeting up with that person to also explain that circumstance in the letter of recommendation. So that would be a very strong letter of support. Yeah. But yeah, I think that, so Amber had to hop off because she has to attend a graduate school orientation. But if you guys have any more questions for the panelists, please submit them now.
I'm just going to answer this live because I just saw this in the chat. But the question is, as an international student, I am seeking a PhD program in cancer biology, which is biomedical science. Is it a must that I get a supervisor before applying to any graduate school? So generally for most, if not all, biomedical science PhD programs, your first year, you will have rotations, which are you pick 3 labs with 3 different supervisors and you try out each and every one of them and before you join one for many years. So the answer is no, but definitely check all of your programs that you're going to apply to and make sure that they have this rotation system in place. You are muted.
Oh no, I was just going to type this out, but I want to just say that not all programs also have rotations, but that was just like.
Okay. I also think someone has their hand raised. Oh, I think they just asked it. Okay.
Oh. And as for the slide deck being posted, so if you are in our GSMI Scholar and Mentor community, it will be posted on the website. But all the slides are actually presented, it's live stream onto YouTube. So this recording will forever be on our YouTube channel. And so everything's going to be there. And I realize that there's a lot of hyperlinks in the presentation. Yeah. So after this session concludes, I will also be posting all of the resources that we mentioned in the chat box, also that were included in the presentation in the description box. So that will all be made open access to you guys.
I just answered this in the chat. Yusuf asked, is it appropriate to include potential supervisor who I would like to work with in my statement of purpose? Yes. So when you write your statement of purpose, personal statement, always include 3 to 4 potential supervisors or PIs that you want to work with. If this is the one, that's probably the number one advice for the personal statement, is know who you want to work with. And we're not saying that just as current grad students, but this has been told to us by current faculty members.
And more detail into what makes up an effective and strong personal statement will be coming up very soon and shortly. So please check our Eventbrite for that webinar as well.
I just saw a question and I have too long of an answer to type. My hands are tired. So the question was about some graduate programs will require a diversity statement, and the question was asking if they can get insight into what this is and what should go in a diversity statement. So ideally, in a diversity statement, you want to talk about things like, okay, I'm going to use myself as an example. I'm a Black woman. I'm also first generation and I'm of Caribbean descent. And that's important to my identity because that has influenced my trajectory in certain ways. And so, how I wrote my diversity statement was to talk about how growing up in an underserved community as an unrepresented minority, I did not see scientists that looked like me. I did not know that going into a career, becoming a neuroscientist was something that was possible for me. And in my diversity statement, I talked about my first interaction with a Black professor who was a neuroscientist and the research she did, and how that influenced me to want to become like her. And I talked about how representation is so important because having met that Black scientist changed my trajectory because she introduced me to the field. And then, like, for me, because I saw her there, it made me think that I too could be a neuroscientist because there was someone who looked like me. And then I used that to use that example that's part of my story to talk about how in grad school, there are certain programs that I now want to be involved in to do diversity and outreach work because I know how meaningful that was for me. And so I would want to take a hand in motivating the next generation of scientists, to not only see Black representation in the STEM field, but also be able to talk to someone like me and know that, like, it's okay to mess up, it's okay to make mistakes, and it's okay to think outside the box. It's okay to diverge from med school. I mean, may we all be free from immigrant parent expectations of all going to med school. But yeah, it's okay to do all that, and it's okay to see a friendly face or someone that looks like you. So in general, you want your diversity statement to be about your story, if you have something that inspired you. And then also the second part of that is how you, as a person who has a diverse identity, will be able to continue the work. How are you going to use your background and how you look and your representation to now influence the people who come after you?
Awesome.
Sorry, I think that was a great segue. Actually, thank you so much for sharing that, Dennisha. So before we officially conclude this webinar, would you guys, like the panelists, do you guys have any words of advice, any last words to give out to, you know, everyone that's in this webinar right now, as they are venturing on and beginning their PhD application? Last words of advice.
I can start since I was the first one that started after the presentations. I can tell you that starting the PhD is a great process. I've been doing it for almost 5 years, and I really liked it. While applying, be mindful that you're applying for a specific institution. So treat every application separately. So that will help you to organize what you have to do and the deadlines that you have to have, the amount of money that you will invest in each one of these applications. And once you have gone through the application process and you are called for the interview, consider that you are already there. So you're already a winner at that stage. And it's just a matter for you to find the best fit to start the PhD. You will encounter some problems along the way, but with the organization and having everything in time, I think you will do great. And I think that's the best advice that I can give.
I think they're busy typing away answers to some of your questions, but
So what was the question? Sorry, I was busy typing.
any like last words of advice, you know, as most of them are actually starting off their applications, like what are some things for them to keep in mind as they're going through this entire process?
It's okay if you make your list of schools and you decide to change them like last minute. I did that a lot. The factors of what makes a good program and what school is good for you is completely up to you. For me, it is pretty much the number one was the type of mentor that I was going to work under. That influenced things heavily, especially between the first and the second times that I applied to my PhD.
Definitely mentorship.
Just a quick word of advice. Sorry, I was like trying to get all the questions. Okay, but first of all, the applying to the PhD process is a lot, and you are going to get overwhelmed at some point. Remember to start early and plan ahead. Definitely take breaks because it can be a lot. But also keep in mind that whatever institution you are meant to end up at, you will in the end. So do not be afraid of the possibility of a rejection because an acceptance will soon come. And so just go ahead and apply anyways and put your best foot forward. And that is it.
Yeah. And actually that reminds me. And so, you know, just keep in mind that if you do like get rejection, it's not personal. Don't take it personally, because maybe, for example, you had an interest in like a computational lab, but that computational lab, as the panelists have mentioned, may not have funding, right? Or that PI was on sabbatical, things like that. So it's always important. Don't take rejections personally. I think there's gonna be a lot of it. And so we don't learn from nothing, right? We always learn from mistakes. And so, yeah. And so I think it's important to also don't be afraid to ask for help. That would be my advice. And don't be afraid to reach out to any of us here on this Zoom sessions call. DM Científico Latino on Twitter, email us. We will help you in any way that we can. And if we can't do that, then we'll redirect you to any of the resources or other existing STEM organizations that will help. So yeah. So with that, I want to thank all the panelists on this webinar. So thank you guys so much for being here, sharing words of wisdom. Thank you, all of you on the Zoom call and everyone on YouTube for coming, taking the time to listen to us and to all of them. And so, yeah, we hope that you guys learned a lot and we wish you the best with your PhD applications. And be on the lookout for upcoming webinars. So thanks, guys.